my name is Dan Garfield, and I am excited to be here today to talk about getting started with GitOps using Argo CD Autopilot. We're going to do an introduction into GitOps. We're going to talk about Argo CD. If you haven't used this tool, it is amazing. You're going to love it. And Argo CD Autopilot for bootstrapping our environments and doing promotion across environments. So this is kind of an introduction talk, but it's going to be hands-on, and it's going to have some examples that you can go and do yourself. If you haven't done this kind of stuff before, it should be very accessible and easy. And even if you have, maybe we'll show you some patterns that will be interesting for you. So let me jump right into my presentation here. We've got a couple of slides. We've got some lots of terminal time, so we'll jump into that. So like I said, we're going to do an introduction to GitOps. We're going to do some patterns using Argo CD and talk about how to do promotion across environments. We're going to set it all up. We're going to do the live demo. And this should all hopefully be super clear. Just to introduce myself, my name is Dan Garfield. I run the open source organization at Codefresh. You can't see my my Twitter handle there, but it's at Today Was Awesome. I am a Google developer expert, and I'm a member of the Forbes Technology Council. For those that don't know the open source org at Codefresh, basically our mission is to open source all the things. We're focused really heavily on our work with Argo as a project, our work with the GitOps working group under this, both projects under the CNCF, and basically enabling that. So if you know anybody that wants to do open source work, send them my way. We are hiring like crazy. So interested to talk to you if I can hear from you. I'd love to. So I am on Twitter at Today Was Awesome, and I'll just to move my thing there, you can see it. There we go. All right. So let's get into GitOps. GitOps is currently at version 0.1. And it is a open CNCF project. We founded it back in January 2021, December 2020, that range. You're going to be able to see, there are a couple of different founding members here. You've got Codefresh, which is where I come from. We've got GitHub, we've got Azure, we've got Red Hat, Weaveworks, Amazon. And since then, since we started the project, we've actually had quite a few different companies. I think we've had over 60 different companies actually express interest. We're currently at version 0.1. Version 1.0 is currently being worked on. The release candidates are there. So what I'm going to cover today are the principles sort of in spirit as we are still nailing down some of the wording. But this is an open standard. And if you talk to anybody and they say, hey, I'm doing GitOps, ask them if these are the things they're doing. And it's not meant to be a, beat people over the head with it, but it is meant to be a very clear standard. Open GitOps is a clear standard that anybody can follow. Join at opengitops.dev. We'd love to have more members, more people helping out. There's lots and lots of work to be done on that project. So let's not belabor that too long. Let's get into what GitOps is. And it basically describes the principles under which a system should be operated. So every principle is essentially describing the desired state and then how that's going to operate with the system. So GitOps principles number 1, the desired state of your GitOps managed system must be declarative. And this makes perfect sense. A lot of people have used infrastructure as code. Declarative means idempotency, it means repeatability, it means reliability, it means you state what you want. It's not imperative, where it's scripted and things have to develop. Basically, you make a statement about what the system should be. Now, this is a little bit different than just infrastructure as code, because declarative applies not just to the infrastructure, but also to the application and the configuration and everything needed to run that application. So if you need to have a database, we should have a declarative declaration of how that database should operate, how it should connect to your services. We should have a declarative manifest describing exactly how the application should be run. Where are the binaries pulled from? All those kinds of things that you need to have. So declarative is number 1. And once you have principle number 1, declarative, and a lot of people that are doing infrastructure as code, they're at least halfway there, right? You need to get all of the components there, but you're halfway there, right? So once you have the entire application stack described in a declarative way, principle number 2 is that the desired state of that GitOps managed system must be versioned and immutable. Now, this seems overly complicated. Why would you say versioned and immutable? I can see it says versioned a immutable because my face is in the way. I'll move it out of the way. But versioned and immutable goes a little bit beyond just Git, and it also expands beyond Git. So versioned, meaning, of course, we have a different version for each change on the configuration, and immutable because we want to point to those versions in an immutable way. They can't be changing, they can't be mutating. So for example, if you are using Git and you have a manifest where the image that is being deployed to a system is described by the latest tag, we would say it's not really versioned and immutable because updates to that configuration actually aren't being versioned because we're not changing the image tag. Hopefully that's an example that tracks with everybody and makes sense. But basically, it's not just using Git, but it's also using it in the right way. And of course, it also means that you could be using Perforce. You could be using SVN or some other version control system. You could even use some other system that wasn't traditionally a version control system as long as it is versioned and immutable. I think like a Google Sheet could potentially actually meet this requirement. So we've got our system is declarative, and it is versioned and immutable. And we're talking about the desired state here, and I didn't really emphasize that. The actual state of our system is the actual state, whatever it is. The desired state is, of course, the declaration of how that system should look. Now, we're going to get into how to reconcile that with principle number 3, which is that it should be deployed automatically. So once that desired state is defined, it's stored in a versioned, immutable way, that should be deployed automatically. And I'll move my face out of the way here again. It should be deployed automatically. Now, a lot of people are scared of this step because you've done maybe continuous delivery, but not continuous deployment. You always want to have somebody with a button to press here. What this really says is that your system needs to store things in such a way and operate in such a way that once it is defined in your declarative immutable versioned format, so if it's a Git repo, let's say it's in your main branch, that should be deployed automatically. Now, that means that if you want to do continuous delivery, not continuous deployment, you can, but you need to do it through Git control. You need to have a control system essentially operating to prevent things from getting merged. Because once it's merged, it should be getting deployed. And that's basically how we define the desired state of what should be running is whatever is running in that sort of canonical location. And it needs to be continuously reconciled. My face just keeps getting in the way of things. Continuously reconciled. I'll just move it over here for now. We'll just come back. Continuously reconciled means that you need a way to continually monitor. Basically, you need to have some sort of software agent that is continually monitoring the actual state of your system against the desired state of your system. And it needs to be constantly comparing those things. And this is different than traditional like deployment where, well, once I update my repo, I could have a deploy hook that happens. Well, continuously reconciled means if state in my actual state changes, that would trigger a reconciliation. So state changes in production will trigger reconciliation to occur and basically to resync and get things redeployed. So it is, this continuous reconciliation is important because it helps you avoid issues where maybe there's some drift in your production, maybe some changes have occurred, maybe somebody has unauthorized access to the system, or maybe a well-meaning DevOps engineer has connected to the wrong system automatically and made changes. This would be picked up by a software agent, a GitOps agent, immediately, and the reconciliation is going to occur. So these software agents that are doing the continuous reconciliation, that's critical for doing GitOps, and it's very different than the old. You can think of it like a pull method where we're pulling things onto the server and pulling in the traditional engineering sense where we're actually checking those things constantly, but we're pulling those onto our deployment environment and making the changes rather than opening up a connection to a remote server and pushing changes to it. So this is a pretty critical component of GitOps, and it's one that is often overlooked by people that maybe are. I hear lots of people saying, well, I store everything in Git and I can make a change in Git and it is deployed. And that is good. I mean, that's definitely a great thing to be doing. I don't want to discount that at all. But continuously reconciled means that you're also monitoring the actual state of the system, and you're actually pulling changes onto it instead of pushing changes onto it. So that makes a huge difference in the way that you operate. And it's not enough just to have, lots of scripting and sort of imperative scripting happening to make your deployments happening. You need to have all these components in place to really be doing GitOps. And I don't mean that in the sense of like, well, you're not doing GitOps actually. I mean it in the sense of like, if you want to get all of the advantages of GitOps, these are the things that are going to help you do that. So continues to reconcile is number 4, which means that our entire system is going to be 5 operated in a closed loop. That means a couple of things. One, it means that if something changes in production, if there is, let's say that there is suddenly nodes start disappearing from the network. You don't have any control over it. Nodes are going down. This should actually trigger some kind of, under normal operation, this should trigger some kind of feedback loop that goes and maybe causes alerts and things like that because we're actually monitoring the system. But operating in closed loop also means that people aren't connecting directly to our production environment to make changes. They are using Git. They're using this version control system. They're using their declarative versions to make those changes and only those changes. And this one right here is pretty critical because if you actually do this, you can avoid a significant amount of downtime. And if we look over the last few years, we look at 2 years ago, I think, AWS had its largest outage in history. It was caused by somebody connected directly to a production system and making an unconfigured change, an untested change. That caused the whole network to crash, whole cascade effect. Cloudflare went through a similar outage about, I want to say in early 2020, maybe late 2019, similar thing, configuration made manually on these systems, didn't go through version control, wasn't operated in a closed loop, caused an outage and lots of downtime. So this is, if you do all 5 of these principles, you are very likely to avoid lots of downtime, and you are more likely to avoid regressions, and you're more likely to be able to deploy more often. So that's the introduction to GitOps. And if those principles don't make sense, hopefully as we get into the hands-on portion here in a second, we're going to see how these principles actually operate, and you're going to feel more confident in understanding it. And maybe some of you are looking at this and you're saying, this all seems pretty simple. Well, let's see how the demo goes and see if all of this lines up with your expectations. So just as a pattern here, and I'm going to move my head is in the way every time I do anything. This is an example view here. This is a common pattern. Essentially, you have an application repo. This is the one that we're going to set up today. You have an application repo where everything to run your application is defined. And then you have a runtime or a config repo, an infrastructure repo sometimes is called. But basically, your application repo defines how your application runs, and then the code for that, building it, the binaries, maybe the Docker images, and changes to that should generate manifests that go into some kind of a runtime code repo, an infrastructure repo, if you will. Why a 2-repo approach? Why do we do that? Well, it basically allows us to have a separation between sort of the application. Well, I don't want to say application layer in the networking sense, but in the DevOps sense, a sort of application layer versus runtime layer, if you can think of it kind of like that. I don't know if that makes a total sense, but that separation makes our lives a lot easier because we can make changes to the application, which then we trigger pull requests or changes to the runtime configuration, and those can be rejected. So they can be tested separately. So your application is tested first, and then so you kind of your unit test almost, and then your integration test as you go into the other repo. And so this staged approach helps, and it also helps with permissions because you might have people that can make changes to the application, but that can't make changes to the runtime configuration because you have different teams and things like that. Also works really well for like mono repo if you have these two separated because it's just clearer and more defined. So once you see it in practice, I think it'll make sense. We'll jump into it. So the other thing is we have an operator, and this is the software agent that I was talking about earlier. This is going to be sitting on our Kubernetes cluster, and it's going to be monitoring the runtime code. the declared configuration and the actual configuration, and it's going to be doing the reconciliation and the deployments and all of those kinds of things for us. So this pattern, if we examine it for a second, first of all, let's answer, let's just introduce what Argo CD and Argo CD Autopilot are. Argo CD is the world's fastest growing and most popular open source GitOps tool today. It is growing incredibly fast. It's incredibly popular with users. We've just seen this project explode over the last 3 years. We love to see that. Love to see people jumping on this project and adopting it. Originally started by Intuit, a team at Intuit, and now it's maintained by Intuit and Codefresh, Red Hat. Several other companies are involved in running this and maintaining this project. We're very interested in it because most of Codefresh's technology is actually built on Argo. So we're sort of the enterprise distribution of Argo is kind of how you can think of Codefresh. So this is where we came in. And Argo CD as a tool basically is that GitOps operator. It sits on your cluster, monitors everything, deploys, it provides a nice UI, very easy to use and very clear. If you haven't used Argo CD, it's an incredibly popular product, open source tool. And one of the things that we've run into over the last few years is as it's grown, some people have said, well, I need like a more clear way to manage this thing. I want to manage it in a GitOps fashion. I don't want to just install it manually. I want to use the principles of GitOps to deploy this thing. And then I also want a clear view of how my directories should be structured. How should I promote something from staging to production? What should that look like? So this is where Argo CD Autopilot comes in. This is something that the Codefresh team launched back in, I want to say March, April, let's say May 2021. Again, my head's in the way, so just to move that, it's an Argo Labs project. So Argo project -labs/Argo CD Autopilot. You can just Google Argo CD Autopilot. You'll find it right away. And basically, it's a GitOps compliant way to install and manage Argo CD, create your structure in Git, promote changes across environments, handle secrets, and also enable disaster recovery. So it's a really cool Swiss Army knife, kind of a power users tool, and also a tool for people that just want to have a clear, directed way of using Argo CD, of doing GitOps, and making sure that it's all done in sort of a nice, compliant, straightforward way. So we'll jump into it, but first, looking at this pattern, we can say, first of all, is it declarative? Yes, we have our desired state sitting in our runtime. Is it versioned and immutable? Yes, it's sitting in our Git repo. Now, assuming that we've implemented it correctly, we're not, abusing the latest tag or something like that. It is versioned and immutable. Is it deployed automatically? Yes. Anytime I make a change to my runtime code, it's going to be picked up by the operator and deployed. Is it continuously reconciled? Yes. If there's a change in state to production, I can actually have a correction done from based on the source of truth, and the source of truth is my declared version, which is sitting in my repo. And of course, it is operating in a closed loop. We're not going to be messing with the system manually. So let's jump into the demo, because I think that's what people really care about. I've saved about half the time for us to do this. So let's jump on into the terminal, and here we are in the terminal, and I've set up actually 2 clusters. In this case, I'm going to be using Google Cloud. You could be using AWS. You could be doing this locally. I don't know why I have the affinity here. Maybe it's because they gave me a nice badge and called me a Google developer expert a few years ago and invited me to a nice concert. But I do really love their tools. But again, this would work equally well on any Kubernetes cluster. I do this on a K3s cluster for my home lab, and I've used this on AWS. I've used it all over the place. So I'm sitting in an empty Git repo, and I've already just created the repo. Argo CD Autopilot can actually do that for you. I've installed the CLI, but if you haven't created your repo yet, you can do Argo CD Autopilot repo create. You have to specify your owner, and then you have to specify the name, and it will basically go and create a repo for you and do that work for you. But I've already done that, and I've already created my 2 clusters, and I think I am currently on a staging instance. Okay, cool. So I'm currently on my staging instance of my Kubernetes cluster. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're just going to bootstrap this repo. Argo CD Autopilot, and we do repo bootstrap. And, oh, I didn't, oh, wait, hang on, let me do it in this window. Argo CD. I forgot to mention, you do need to pass in a Git token as well as specify the Git repo. So I've already done that in this window here, so we should be able to pick it up. Argo CD Autopilot repo bootstrap. Sorry. Typos abound. Now, what's this going to do? Couple of things. First of all, I'm connected to my staging instance. You can see it just called it out here. See there, whoa, lots of stuff is happening. And what it's going to do is, because I'm connected to that, it's going to deploy Argo CD. It's going to configure it. And once it is ready and working, it's going to take all those manifests and it's going to put them into my Git repo. Now, this means that I can do disaster recovery later, or I can go to another cluster and set this up later because I will have this already defined and specified. So lots of times, and this is kind of ironic, people that use Argo CD don't do it in a GitOps way. They just deploy the thing and then everything after that is GitOps. But I actually want everything. I want GitOps all the things, right? So that's what I'm going to do here by deploying Argo CD using Argo CD Autopilot, because it's going to deploy it to my Kubernetes cluster and then it's going to set up the relationships. Now, I only need a connection to the cluster during the setup process. After this, I could basically get rid of my connection to the cluster and just do everything through Git, and I'll be safe to do that in that way. So this will take a second to, it looks like it's now bootstrapped. It's creating the login, and it will have written everything. So I'm going to save this password because I'm going to be logging in here in just a second. Let's just go ahead and run this in the background here so it's out of the way. So this is going to create just a port forward for my local. And now I can go to, excuse me, I can go to my browser and we'll go to localhost 8080 and we'll be able to log in. Go ahead and proceed. And let's see, I think the login is just admin and then the password that we had there. I might have had the wrong password. Hang on. There we go. So now we're logged in. We can see it's actually still finishing up syncing the latest bits from Argo CD, so that's pretty cool. But we can see everything is now synced, everything's working okay. Let's go back to our terminal and we'll explore this a bit more. I'm gonna go ahead and pull the latest from Git, and you can see now I actually have a whole directory structure that I've created. And if I go to .com/today was awesome, I'm gonna go to my demo. Oh, I need to move this bad boy up a little bit. There we go. We can actually just go and explore this. So here you can see this repo has now been bootstrapped. All these things were created in the last 2 minutes. Currently, most of this stuff is going to be empty. Basically, the bootstrap is going to contain the configuration that is running Argo CD right now. So let's go further. We need to deploy an application. I want to create some projects, and then you'll be able to see how this directory structure is going to work. So now that I've got that done, I've got it deployed, and I'm going to create a project. I can't say it. Argo CD Autopilot. Let's see, project create staging. So we'll run that. And basically what this is going to say is we've deployed Argo CD. I want that instance of Argo CD to be part of staging. And because I didn't pass any arguments to it, it's basically going to say, I'm going to assume that the cluster that I'm on is the one that I'm managing, and the repo that I'm connected to is the one that I'm connected to. So you can see it even pulled the repo mentioned there. So staging is now defined. And let's create our first application. I'm going to be using a demo app, and I'll just show you in Git what it is really quick. Oh, that's almost it. What did I paste incorrectly here? Basically, Argo CD Autopilot, Argo Labs. Where is this guy? Okay. Examples demo app. There's the, oh, I needed to go to the, right. So anyway, there we go. This is the demo app. It's just got a deployment and it's got a customization. I don't know if, how many of you have used Customize before? It's a similar tool to Helm, basically templating and value substitution and things like that. But pretty cool tool, and we're going to be using it in Argo CD Autopilot. So let's jump over to and create our application. So the way this is going to go, Argo CD Autopilot, and we're going to do app create demo app. And you can see I've actually run this recently. I'm going to replace this with staging, and I'm just passing in the repo of where the application repo is. So remember, we're using this two-step repo process that I mentioned earlier. And this is going to grab that repo, and it's going to then create the application inside of Argo CD. So we could wait a second for this to run. I could run a sync. It should pick it up in just a second. So let's give it just a half a second. Usually it picks it up right away. There it goes. Okay, so you can see now it's picked up the staging version of my demo app, and it is doing the rollout. So I've deployed my first application using this. Now I defined it in a repo, and what's happened in my, let's see what's happened in my demo environment. First of all, under projects, I now have a staging YAML. This basically says the cluster that the Argo CD instance is on is staging. And if I go to my apps, I'll now have an app for demo app. And the base basically defines where this thing comes from. So you can see the resource that it's going to consume is here. And then it's going to create an overlay for staging. And the overlay is basically going to be empty right now. It's just going to take the base application and deploy it. We didn't define anything else. We didn't make any other changes. We're going to do that in a second. So now that I've created this in staging, let's create it in production. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create my new project. So Argo CD Autopilot, and let's see, project, create prod. Now you can see I've already typed this in this command earlier today, but destination kube context is going to be the name of the cluster that it's in my local kube config. I'm going to tell it to port forward, and port forward namespace is Argo CD. That's basically telling it how it's going to connect to the Argo CD instance that I have in this staging. So I'm going to run that. It sees my production. It's creating the service role. It's creating the bindings. And it is done. So now that that project has been created, we can deploy our application again to production. Argo CD Autopilot app, create demo app, but here instead of staging, we're going to say prod. That's what I named it, right? Prod. So this basically says anything that's deployed to the prod version of the application is going to go to that instance of my my production instance that's defined and managed underneath this same instance of Argo CD. So I essentially have like the interface for the Argo CD running from prod in this staging instance. So you can see it's now deploying that prod demo app. That's out. I know we're running low on time, so let's hurry up and get this thing going. We're going to go back to our overlays. We can now see that we have a prod overlay, and let's make a quick change. I'm going to go to staging. This is how you would do a change across environments. So I'm going to make a change to my staging overlay, and I've grabbed a image that I'm going to be updating. So I'm defining under images a new name and a new version, and I'm going to commit this directly just for the sake of time. Normally, of course, we wouldn't, really do it this way. Now that that's been defined, we can see that you're going to see staging is going to pick up that change. It may have already picked it up and deployed it, and it's going to run it there. Now, once it's in staging, if I wanted to move this up into production, that would be very easy. We would just go back to overlays, prod, and again, I'm just doing this in the UI for funsies, for sake of ease of use. We would make that change there, and we would then deploy it. And you can see staging finished syncing, and in another second, it's picked up the change in production and is synced and running. So you can see how this repo works, how it's structured. check out Argo CD Autopilot. Very easy to use, very straightforward. Just looking at this, you can see the directory structure is very clear. The interface for how we create new applications, how we create new projects is very clear. It's a very, very scalable, reliable model of structuring your repos. It's fully GitOps compliant, which is even better. And it's going to work with all these open source tools. And if you ever decide to go use like the enterprise distribution of Argo that Codefresh offers, it'll work really well with all that stuff too. This is very popular with our customers. But we've been seeing this take off and really, really happy with the progress it's made. So check out Argo CD Autopilot. It works really well. And if you haven't done GitOps before, it's like the most turnkey, easiest way to get started that I've found. I've tried a whole bunch of different tools. And you can try this stuff out. You can find more information at codefresh.io. You can hit me up on Twitter at todaywasawesome. Like I mentioned, the open source org is looking for people, so we'd love to have you. And that's all I got for you today. So hopefully that was helpful. Hit me up. Let me know if you hated it. Let me know if you loved it. I hope you loved it. And thanks. We'll see you around. Appreciate it. Bye.